Hi, welcome to my channel, Michelle Gay Science Teacher. Today I'm talking about lesson planning. I love to lesson plan and prepare lessons for my students so that they're engaging, high interest, and accomplish the things that I set out for me to teach my students. Today, I plan to share a few of the tips and things that I have learned over the years of teaching in public school. I have taught for 27 years and I am a national board certified teacher for over 10 years. So I hope that some of the things that I have learned will help you out as a new teacher or a veteran teacher. The first thing I like to look at when planning my lessons are the standards. I like to look at the state standards and decide what I am supposed to teach. When I know what standards I'm going to teach, then I can begin to prepare my objectives. When you're looking at standards, make sure you're following along, whether it's local or whether it's state, and some standards we follow are national. Look at those standards, study them, and see how you can implement them. Once you understand your standards, then you can begin the next thing that I do. I like to do my research. Research is so important to me. That means that I like to gather background information on the topic that I'm teaching. It could be in social studies, it could be in science, it could even be in reading or mathematics. But I like to do the background information so that I am aware of everything that I need to touch bases on with my students. Also, it allows me to answer questions that kids are curious about that sometimes that's not even in the textbook or in the information that you're using to teach your students. So if you are aware and have the knowledge that you can give them, you are the expert in that classroom. So how do I get my background knowledge? Well, I do research on the internet. I read textbooks, I read articles, I look at PowerPoints. Wherever I need to find the information, I plug it into the search engine and look at several resources because not everything on the internet is legit, and sometimes I find out something different from each resource that I can tie in together. So I take gaining background knowledge very seriously because I want to make sure my students are learning accurate information. So do your background research. Does it take time? It does, but it doesn't take as much time as you think once you begin to just do that as a habit. I've done it for over the years. And I still do it. Even if I've taught that topic before, I go back and do my research again. The next thing, once I have my research done, and so now I want to begin writing my objectives. I know what my standards are, so I'm not going to put in the standard. I'm going to write the objective, what I want my students to accomplish when we are through with the end of the lesson. Now, when I write my objectives, I like to use the Bloom's taxonomy because I want to make sure that I'm moving my students from different levels, from basic level knowledge all the way up to creative and synthesizing, evaluating. So, for instance, when I'm writing an objective, I want to write something like a student will design and build a car that will travel 100 meters. So now I'm up into the higher level of Bloom's taxonomy because they are designing and building. Now, of course, I would put building under application, which is okay, but I don't want to go back to the basics and say students will learn about building cars. I want to put it where my students are actually doing the work. So get you a copy of the Bloom's taxonomy. You can find it online. But the higher you go up, the higher order thinking skills you are pushing towards your students. After I write my objectives, and I know what I'm going to do. Now it's time for me to think about, okay, how am I going to implement this lesson? Am I going to do small group? Am I going to teach whole group? Am I going to use collaborative groups? So I'm thinking about these things in order that when I write the actual plan, I can write it in there. And so when I go back and look at them, I'm going to do exactly what I put, and I don't have to think about it again. So am I going to use collaborative groups? Okay, so I say, yes, I want to use collaborative groups, but how? Am I going to put them together by ability? Am I going to look at overall behavior? Am I going to look at students who work well together or who accomplish a lot together? Or what process am I going to put them together? Well, to be honest, I have done a variety of things over the years because it depends on my class. It depends on my students for that year, and I do what's best for them, not what's best for me when I'm planning. So once I decide how the approach to way I'm going to teach the lesson, and let me say this, sometimes I do whole group, but at the same time, in that same lesson, I may pull a small group. And then also in that lesson objective, I may do collaborative groups or put them in pairs. So I don't have to stick to one thing, but when I'm writing, that's when I decide what I'm going to do. And sometimes, students even have just independent work. So I have decided how I'm going to approach teaching this lesson. And so I'm thinking about all of that and I'm writing. Now, how am I going to get the information to the students? Well, I will tell you this. I do not lecture because that is not the way I teach. Now, if you lecture, that's fine because you can do that, but that is not my way of teaching. So I began to look at different resources that I have. For instance, I like to use Nearpod. I like to use Google Slides or PowerPoint. I like to use a video sometimes. I like to do a demonstration and model for the students. And then there are times I like for students to do the experiment or a hands-on activity. So I have to think about those things. Now, while I'm thinking about them, I'm not just going to say, oh, I'm going to do a video here and put video. I'm going to go ahead and find that video and plug that link into my lesson plans so that I don't have to worry about that the following week. If I'm going to do a Nearpod, I'm going to put the link to the Nearpod so I don't have to go back and look for that. So let me backtrack about the video. If you're going to use a video, watch it fully before you use it because you want to know the information on that video because during the lesson you may want to pause and talk to your students about what's going on in the video or ask them some questions. And if you're going to do that, add that into your lesson plans so that you will know. You know, when administrators walk into our classrooms and they're looking at our lesson plans, they can follow exactly along what you're doing and not have to question it. That's what I love about doing detailed lesson plans. Now, I do not write a book when I write my lesson plans, so I don't want you thinking that. I still keep it simple, but I'm including all the things that I need to for me because the plans are for me. Now, I know how I'm going to implement. I know what resources I'm going to use. I know how I'm going to group my students, how I'm going to present the lesson. Now I'm writing all of my plans and I'm structuring it where I can go through thoroughly. And then it comes next to evaluation. Decide how are you going to evaluate your students on that particular lesson. Remember, not all lessons require a test because if it may require an observation, it may require answering questions that you're giving to the class. So think about how you want to evaluate your students during that particular lesson. There are so many things that you can do when it comes to lesson planning that can make it easy, that can make it difficult. But my thing about lesson plans is that your plans are for you. You need to plan that when you walk in on whatever day it is, everything's set and ready to go when you look at those plans. You have everything in place because you can just click that link on your computer and pull that video up. You can click the link to your PowerPoint or your Google slide and it pulls up. You're not trying to run around and figure out, where did I see this at? Where did I see that at? Have it all prepared and you will enjoy teaching and not feel stressed out and rushed before the kids come in or before you start a lesson. Now, the other thing is prepare everything you need ahead of time. Whether you're running off materials, if you're doing a science lab, have all your materials gathered and set up. If you're doing, let's say in social studies and your students are doing some type of art that related to it, have all those materials set up so that when it's time that day, all you have to do is have it ready and get it done. And not have to think about looking and say, oh, I'm out of blue paint. Let me go down the hall and see if someone has some blue paint. Okay, listen, been there, done that. So years ago, and so I understand that sometimes we don't have something, but it's better to go the day before or a few days before and ask, or go and purchase it or do what you need to do so you'll have it in order. When do I plan? I like to plan for the beginning of the month. Now, I teach gifted education, so I do a unit plan and I just do the entire plan for the month. But when I was in the general classroom, I planned the week before. I wouldn't plan out for 2 weeks, but I would plan the week before for 1 full week. I never planned on the day of a lesson. That is too stressful. And not only that, I'm the teacher, I'm the expert, and my kids, their job is to come to school and learn. My job is to come to work and teach. And so I have to be prepared for them. So I prepare ahead of time the week before. Yes, I may make some changes throughout that plan, but at least the plans are prepared and ready. So prepare ahead of time. I won't even do it on the weekend. They give us planning at school, so I try to get it done during my planning time each day and have everything prepared before I walk out on Friday afternoon. And when I return Monday morning, I can just do a few little things and I'm ready to go. Well, I know that being a new teacher or a veteran teacher, planning is something very important and it does take time. But I hope the things that I've shared with you today can make it a little bit easier. If you have any questions about the things that I do, leave them in the comments below and I will be happy to answer them. I do not consider myself an expert, but I do consider myself proficient in what I do when it comes to lesson planning. So I hope these tips helped you out, and I will be sharing some other things during my summer series on going back to school. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.